Thank you, Dell and Convolt, for the great fireside chat. Our next panel will be around securing your remote workforce. Today's workforce is distributed and work from home is here to stay. It's time to secure the sprawl of people and technology. In the panel, CDI will interview key security vendors to identify the best solution for securing your remote workforce. We'll discuss the new perimeter and how you can achieve least privilege trust environment. We will also discuss the importance of leveraging partners to help you identify the true signals between the real events amongst all the false positives in the marketplace. Without further ado, what I'd like to do is introduce our team of panelists. Starting first, Renee Tarrin from Fortinet.
Thanks, Peter. Hi, everyone. I'm Renee Tarrin. I'm Deputy CISO at Fortinet. I've been at Fortinet now for almost 4 years. I've been focusing on our internal security, our product security, and our policy and compliance. Prior to joining Fortinet, I spent over 20 plus years with the U.S. federal government. Part of that time was with the U.S. Secret Service, and then the majority of that time was at the National Security Agency.
Thank you, Renee. Thank you for joining us. Next up, I have Keith Reisman from SentinelOne.
Thanks, Peter. As you mentioned, Keith Wiseman from SentinelOne. I've been with SentinelOne a couple of years. We're focused on endpoint security and endpoint protection. Prior to joining SentinelOne, I spent about 18 years focused on incident response and computer forensics.
Thank you, Keith, for joining us today. Next up, I have Chris Hollenbeck from Tanium.
Thanks, Peter. I'm Chris Hollenbeck. I'm the CISO for the Americas with Tanium. I focus mostly on internal related projects, our most recent offering in cloud, which has been an adventure in itself. And before that, I've had time in the federal government as well, focused a lot on incident response throughout my career, even back to when I was a system administrator, but really focused on breaking that cycle of incident response where we can.
Thanks, Chris. Last up, I've got Danny Connolly from Zscaler.
Hey, good afternoon. My name is Danny Connolly. I am CISO for the Americas at Zscaler. I'm also covering federal. I spent the last 11 years as the Associate Chief Information Security Officer at CDC, focused on all cyber operational activities, meeting incident response, forensics, firewalls, basically all the key operational components of the cyber programs kind of under my purview. So very familiar with what's going on out there today and how hard it is to keep up.
Thank you, Danny. And thank you to everyone for participating today. I'm looking forward to a great discussion. To start the conversation, I'd like to throw a question out to the entire panel. Please feel free to jump in where you feel appropriate. What does the middle of the 21st century look like given today's explosive growth and disruption in the remote workforce?
Peter, I mean, when you think about it, we've moved away from a castle and moat way of thinking of things. So I think now it's going to be compute and commute from wherever. That's access is going to be ubiquitous. So we have to address that and adjust to that. I don't see us going back to the way things were. As far as what's going to happen in the middle of this century, it's almost anyone's guess at this point. Certainly over the next few years, we're going to have a completely different way that people access information for work.
I would also add that really we're seeing a significant increase in ransomware attacks and various threats. And we really need to evolve not just our IT or modernize our IT to support the business, but we need to evolve our cyber programs and leverage new cloud-based security solutions or basically helping the frontline defenders out there actually protect their enterprise.
Yeah, I would say the way the threat landscape has expanded. I mean, you now have more environments that we're operating in, but also, you've got billions of edges that now need to be protected, whether that's, your IoT or what have you. And kind of like, what Chris said, you're definitely seeing more sophisticated type attacks, and the threats are increasing. And so from my perspective, I think it needs that shift to be focusing on more proactive, incident response and then more proactive detection and response. But also making sure that you're leveraging automation. We're seeing adversaries that are using AI and machine learning against us, and human speed is no longer, equal or efficient in doing responding to today's threats and attacks. So.
Renee, actually, what you just said, the adversaries are learning. They certainly are. I mean, if you look at where we've gone from very academic discussions about potential attack types, like things in hardware, the supply chain attacks, to nation states actually engaging in some of these activities, some of that becoming public, emboldening now the criminal actors. And with automation, they're automating their activities and lowering their cost and barrier to entry. So I think that's just going to keep accelerating.
Absolutely.
I'd also like to say, Renee, it's interesting that you brought up the, offensive and defensive, because I just got off the phone with a private sector organization that when I asked them about their different roles, one of the gentlemen said he was on the defensive team and the other said they were on the offensive. And I actually felt encouraged by that, because I said, okay, you're understanding now. There needs to be an offensive approach, right? You can't just wait for the events to occur. And here at CDI, one of the ways we embrace that is using BAS. And BAS is a marketplace breach attack simulations. I don't want to spend a lot of time on it today, but it's a way to capture that offensive approach in a very easy to coordinated fashion and put people sort of leaning forward versus on their heels all the time. So thank you for bringing that up.
Hey, Peter, one final point. I think Chris made some excellent points. I do think that, with everything that's happened over the last 12 to 18 months, we do need to continue to expect the unexpected. Just the advent, to Danny's comment around ransomware, I mean, it's definitely unprecedented. The attacks and the sophistication of attacks is also unprecedented.
I can't agree with you more. And matter of fact, the panel prior to this one, if the audience hasn't had an opportunity to listen in, that was all about ransomware. And that there's no silver bullet. It's quite a discussion that we could talk about for a long time. Just moving on to the next question, I wanted to ask Renee, with work from home here to stay, what should organizations be doing to help to keep their employees and organizations safe?
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, I think for a lot of organizations, it's assuring that they have the right security solutions in place and that those solutions will scale. It may mean that ensuring that workers have the same level of security at home like they do in the office. I think traditionally, we were used to focusing on making sure that when our employees were traveling through hotels and airports, that they could securely access their emails. But now we have system administrators and executives accessing the most critical systems and data within your organization. So I think that really mean setting up their home offices, essentially making them almost like pretty mini branch offices. That may mean putting up wireless access points and firewalls so that they can ensure that they are secure when they're connecting into systems. And I also think it means protecting the endpoints. You really need to have that proactive endpoint protection and then being able to do that response, because again, you don't have people coming in the office. They can't necessarily be taking their workstations and laptops to the help desk. And so you really need to be able to have that endpoint protection. So again, in doing things like you can take actions to stop ransomware immediately. And then the other two things I would think would be network access control. You really need to have an understanding of who and what is accessing your network. And leveraging multi-factor authentication. A lot of the social engineering attacks and phishing attacks are targeting user credentials. So adding on an additional layer of authentication is effective. And then last but not least is that security awareness training. A lot of cases when you're remote working, your people are your last line of defense. So it's really being able to ensure that they understand, what to look for in some of those fake emails, but also what does that mean to work remotely? Ensuring that they're changing their default passwords on the routers, things that, when you have workers that may not necessarily be accustomed, to working outside the office.
Renee, when it comes to the other aspect of user education, I think is underappreciated, is helping people understand why they may become a victim. Sometimes it's crime of opportunity. Sometimes it's just because their convenient pass-through or proxy to get to the ultimate target. Because people tend to look and go, I'm a lowly nobody in this company. Why would they attack me? So they don't view themselves as a valid target. So they don't even pay attention to what's going on in terms of the training or other things. They do enough to get past that quiz of mandatory training, and they move on and largely forget it. So I think we need to do better about helping them understand that they may just become a target because of who they know or who they're connected to.
Absolutely. And now we're seeing, some of the sophistication with these social engineering attacks that, there is no malicious link. There's no malicious file attached to it. It's simply, emails coming in from known trusted, domains, because it's either a partner or vendor has had their email system compromised. And, the emails are coming in just saying, hey, just change the banking routing information on that next purchase order. There's no technology out there that's going to be able to stop those type, of phishing attacks. So that's why that, I agree, Chris, that education and awareness training is essential.
Well, and also, I would add that, at least I don't have a full security stack, for protecting my home network. And I have kids, so they're doing digital learning. In some cases, we're sharing computers. It's difficult to roll out a capability to provide that level of protection, like URL filtering, for example, or SSL inspection, decrypting web traffic to find those hidden or covert threats. It's very difficult in an enterprise environment. Doing it from home is even more difficult unless you're using persistent VPN. But most organizations aren't requiring their employees to use a persistent VPN. So that means when they need to access corporate applications, they're VPNing in, but otherwise they're browsing the internet with no protection. So if you go out to the internet and maybe there's a malicious advertisement and you're infected with whatever variant of malware was targeting you, all of a sudden they have a foothold on your endpoint, and when next time you connect to VPN on your corporate application, they can start moving laterally. I mean, it's the same systemic issue of, once you have an endpoint that's infected, can you contain that endpoint? Can you make sure your business applications are isolated so there's no movement to those or no impact to those?
Yeah, and Danny, something I've been having a lot of discussions around lately is, and you just touched on it, but the time to containment. Knowing that these environments are so complicated now, quite frankly, and it, admittedly it used to be, and it even more is so now, a question of not if, but when. That time to contain becomes so important. So when an issue does arise, how quickly can you get your arms around it and make sure it doesn't turn into, something that frankly affects your bottom line?
And Keith, bringing that back to what Renee said earlier around, work from home, a whole new level of challenge. You can't exactly have that employee walk down the hallway to the help desk with their laptop in hand and say, while you're fixing this, give me a loaner. So, the potential disruption to work from having to contain that one asset, so containing it remotely is important, but can you do the effective response that you need to do, understand what happened on it, and ideally even fix it remotely and remediate so you get them back working faster?
I think what Renee also said is MFA, that identity, identity-based routing, going from the old ports and protocols, methodology to the identity-based routing. Identity is key to all of it. So I think that's just another big factor.
It's I got to tell you, the timeliness, Renee, of your comments is quite interesting. In that I was actually talking to Fortinet, and recently, and my internet wasn't working very well. I was talking to one of the gentlemen who works there, and he said, "Can we send you some Fortinet equipment?" And I didn't really think about it, because I never thought, for home, I would need something like that. And I stepped aside and said to my wife, hey, I think we might set up some enterprise-grade equipment. And she, of course, had no idea what I was talking about. But it's true. You need to really consider thinking more about putting more in your house and the parallels between business and home, and that and technology needs to evolve to become more home-friendly, if you call it. It's very, very timely. Keith, I just wanted to ask you, you know, how have you seen the attackers change their techniques to take advantage of the work from home? I know Renee talked a little bit about that. Um, and, but I'd be interested from your perspective, what are the trends you're seeing and what do you feel we can do that would be more effective to combat these attacks?
Yeah, I think that, I mean, from a trends perspective, I think some of it has remained the same. I think from an attacker community, though, they've realized, now the complexity, like, for example, rewind 18 months ago, I mean, from an attacker perspective, it was relatively still easy for them. I think it's even easier for them now, just with all the other variables that have been thrown into the mix. So I think that's the concern. I do believe that, and this is no news to anyone, but the end user and the endpoint is really the soft underbelly of computer security. It's the easiest thing to exploit. It's the hardest thing to manage and operationalize. What I've seen is just a continued focus on the end user and ultimately any sort of device that they might ultimately use as part of their technology stack. In terms of the second part of your question, in terms of what we can do, I think I touched on it already, but I think, things like time to detect, time to contain are critically important. I think visibility and meaningful visibility is important. But I also do think, and I believe Chris had drawn on this previously, but the ability to do remote remediation and response is critical. So, the days, frankly, are over where if I have an issue on my computer, I can walk it down to the local help desk. It just doesn't scale to put a machine in a box and send it out. So I think that we need to continue to look for technologies that not only provide good and contextual visibility, but also the ability to do remote recovery. And that can be recovery of the system, but also of the actual physical files themselves that the end user might have lost, if you're dealing with a destructive campaign like ransomware.
I feel like that's a softball for Chris to talk about the 14 modules of Tanium, but love to get your perspective on this as well.
I think a lot of it really does come down to knowing what's going on the endpoint, so that you can make decisions, whether it be on the preventive side of things, in terms of take care of the hygiene, then, when something does happen, and that's something that Keith had mentioned, it's the inevitable. As long as you have end users, you're going to have incidents, is my mantra when it comes to that. And that's a challenging thing when you're trying to convey that to the C-suite and to the board of, hey, we should spend money, and then at the same time saying, but we're not going to prevent everything with it. And I think what you had mentioned, there's no silver bullet in all of this. We do the best we can to prevent where possible, reduce the impacts when something does occur, and return people to as close to normal operations as we can on the other side of it. And business, actually, that's the funny thing. We treat cyber differently than we do everything else. And really, cyber is just a lot faster with a greater geographical reach. But all of the same concepts of risk, the business actually already understands. They build that into their costs and the acceptance models and everything else. So I think we just need to be conveying that more in those terms for the business to understand. But yeah, it's be prepared for when it happens. Try to prevent it when you can. The other aspect, Danny, you had mentioned it indirectly a little bit, and others have mentioned it around the endpoint. Identity is a big part of this. We certainly see people moving towards a zero trust model of things because there is no boundary anymore in the same way. But for me, I assume that even if I have strong identification of the person, that some amount of data, whether I intend it to or not, is going to land on that endpoint. So part of my access decision also has to be, what's the security posture of that endpoint? So even if it's a personal device, is it acceptably, configured from a security standpoint to access that type of information? So it's going to be an interesting shift in mentality.
It's a great point.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree with you, Chris, on the whole zero trust access. I mean, traditional security models always had operated on the assumption that everything inside your organization's network should be trusted. But when you automatically extend that trust to any device or user, that can really put your entire organization at risk when either the user or the device becomes compromised, whether that's intentionally or unintentionally. So I think that's why a lot of leaders are turning to that zero trust approach, because again, it's that shifting of the fundamental paradigm of open networks built around inherent trust, to a zero trust. That's with the adoption of those rigorous network access controls. Because again, organizations need to know with high reliability, who and what is accessing, the networks. And from my perspective, when you look at the number of devices that are coming in, you need to be able to discover and identify all those devices on the network, whether that's a user's phone, their laptop, a server, printer, or even those headless IoT devices like your HVAC system or even your security badge readers. This way, you really have to be able to have that continuous monitoring and response to these devices to be able to help identify and remediate any problematic devices before they can affect other devices or systems on your network.
So I could add in one comment. I've been at Zscaler for 4 weeks now, so fresh off the other side, being on the government side at CDC, and the frontline defenders and the folks having to actually protect your network are dealing with so many different initiatives. It's like a firefight every single day for them, whether it be a new threat, new investigation, new issue of the day, or a new OMB mandate. You have to use solutions that make it easy, right? You can't have a year-long project to roll out physical appliances across your network when you're standing up a new cloud service. It's just not feasible when you have limited resources that all have to do the same, all the tasks. So I would say that's what really interested me about Zscaler is it's an innovative solution that makes it easier to deploy, manage, and have prevention. I agree that there are certainly cases where some things could get by, like if there's a malicious USB device inserted into an endpoint, maybe the beacon's stopped from ZIA, but the endpoint is still infected, so it poses a risk to your enterprise. Going back to the key point about the endpoint detection response capability, that's being able to contain that asset before it impacts the rest of your network. But I really think that everybody's really facing the same issues with constrained resources, supporting IT modernization activities, standing up new cloud services, and it's a lot to take on for those frontline defenders. And I can tell you they're going to be overwhelmed.
And you also just don't know where it's going to come from. 2 examples. Had one instance of an IP-enabled fish tank. If you think about a very large saltwater expensive fish tank, again, has internet access, was used to launch attacks. So an IP-enabled fish tank. Instances of printers being used, network-attached printers being used to launch emotet-based attacks. So, it's the visibility and the knowing what's on the network really is pretty critical. And I do think when you hear an example like a fish tank, there's a little bit of humor in it, but it's, the reality of it is if it's IP enabled, it can be used as a source of infection and attack.
Keith, taking it one step further, 5G really changes things, and that, going all the way back to our first thing about, what does the middle of the century look like? The ubiquitous connectivity, high-speed connectivity of just about any device, with 5G now is going to change a lot. And another area where things you don't expect to have other connectivity, medical devices. And in a hospital setting, a lot of device manufacturers will build in alternate data paths for their stuff. And they used to have just a separate management connection, but those hospitals didn't want to provide that connection outbound, or they wanted to meter or control it. So device manufacturers in some cases have just stuck a cellular modem in the device and straight out it goes. So there's a lot of things that lurk in environments, some of which are difficult to detect because they're really not even operating on your network in that sense.
A lot of them are also built without security in mind. I mean, that was not their primary function, but unfortunately, the efficiencies and, the easy usability of some of these headless devices, unfortunately also, pave the way for opportunity for, the adversaries and criminals.
Cost margins are so slim on IoT that they don't want to build the extra capacity to even do management of these things, be able to patch them.
It's very interesting, and I think Renee, you brought up the conversation around trust, right? And if you think about, I'm sure you've all experienced people coming in and out of your institutions that at this point with COVID have never even met anyone face to face, right? Yeah, you're sharing access, and that's just the reality of the world we live in. As Renee, as you think about how to articulate this to senior management, like the board and the executives, I mean, how do you approach that conversation so they can appreciate the magnitude of what we're talking about?
Right. I mean, it comes down to when you look at it from a user perspective and being able to identify the users. Again, you need to know if they're an employee or contractor, guest, or vendor, because you really need to ensure that you can enforce that identity and role-based access control, and so that users only have specific rights and services. Because at the end of the day, and it's also especially using that least access policy, least privileges necessary for people to do the job. Because at the end of the day, it can be employee, a former employee, or even a board member. Ultimately, could present risk, to your environment. So that's why it's really important that you ensure that you have that identity and access management. Having a good handle on it. And similar, like some of like Chris said, I mean, there's so many devices now coming into the environment. These devices also present risks, and it really comes down to being able to manage the risk in your environment, and understanding that these risks, and because they are cyber risks, they ultimately do have an impact on your business. If someone has a compromised user account, they can use that to steal data. Similar as a compromised device, they can use that device to move laterally, inside your network to get key assets. So it really comes down to understanding what are the consequences that you're trying to avoid in your environment. What's that bad thing you don't want to happen? Is it loss of your data, loss of your IP? And there's also those, consequences that you can't measure. That's damage to your brand, damage to your reputation. And so it's really understanding that they understand that, these cyber risks have a risk associated from a business context, and that they can understand that, that's why these initiatives like network access control, zero trust, things are important, because ultimately you're trying to put in the controls to help reduce your overall business risk.
Thanks for that. I appreciate that. I think I wonder if you guys ever, think about the implications of everyone going to the cloud, right? Is there a point at which this effort to get to the cloud becomes counterproductive, and we start having these discussions? Chris, I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
I don't know about counterproductive per se. It's going to be a long time before we get everything off the on-prem world and purely cloud. So we're going to be hybrid for a long time to come. That percentage and that ratio is going to keep shifting, obviously. I think the biggest challenge, and this actually even came up from work from home, is people were in such a rush to get their jobs done, to find new ways of doing things. And so they went to cloud offerings, and some of those cloud offerings were never vetted internally by organizations. There's very little friction to signing up for a cloud offering. So that means that then security has no idea of where the data might be going. There's so many different applications out there for obtaining contact information for people. I'll refrain from naming a few of them out there, but if you install their app and allow it to suck up your address book and upload it into their cloud, they'll give you so many credits towards using their service, things of that sort. So there's all sorts of data that seemingly innocuous that can flow off of someone's device to consume data. I can look at specific cloud offerings where we formally support them internally, and these are our chosen platforms, and I can implement all the security controls perfectly. But if I have a small group of people in a particular part of the company that goes off and finds a new tool that they never put through the approval process, I have no visibility into that at all. And I think that's actually probably our biggest challenge when it comes to a cloud world.
I would also say, just because, it's easier to implement new solutions or new cloud-based solutions, it's faster, right? So businesses can leverage that immediately. But that doesn't mean that it has to be exposed to the internet. You could leverage a cloud service, a cloud solution for whatever function you need to, and have that private, right? Only whatever identities or users that you choose to have access to that application, it should be hidden to everybody else. The port certainly shouldn't be exposed, and I think we all probably know this, that it takes it's very easy to make a mistake in cloud consoles, right? You click one button and you think your application is internal, and now it's sitting out on the internet being targeted. So I think that piece of it, it's very important that we focus or leverage solutions that enable us to leverage cloud solutions securely.
Yeah, I would agree with both Danny and Chris what they said. I mean, in today's environment, anybody with a credit card can go out there and buy that cloud instantiation within the organization. So that does represent the risk of shadow IT. And I think the cloud does gain a lot of efficiencies and quicker time to market for solutions. But at the end of the day, you can't neglect the security. People sometimes think they get confused on who's really responsible for it. Your cloud provider is going to provide that security for your infrastructure, but the majority of times those applications and that data, that's your responsibility.
Shared responsibility models for almost all of these.
Yeah, and majority of cloud breaches happen due to misconfigurations, like Chris said. And so from that perspective, people still need to be mindful of that and ensuring that you're enforcing your security policies in the cloud. Leveraging things like CASB so that even your users, when they're accessing the cloud, that your same corporate policies are being extended into those cloud environments.
Renee, you mentioned earlier around access and identity. One of the challenges is not in the front end of rolling out a zero trust program centered around identity. It's the hygiene of the identity service and actually removing access as people's roles change. I've seen far too many companies, large ones at that, where 8 years later, someone's got access to everything just by virtue of having moved through multiple departments.
I agree. I've seen that, 100 times as well. And it's funny, everyone has their onboarding and exit procedures when people join the company and leave the company. But that one missing piece is that when people, transition departments.
It's interesting.
It's really fundamentally no different than what we saw with Active Directory permissioning years ago. Like those problems existed there and still do, and now they're just impacting cloud and identity providers. It's really no different.
True.
We happen to talk a lot about, we use the word optimization all the time because we find that people have invested a lot of money and resources, human capital and financial, in tools and services, and yet they're not scrutinizing or stress testing them enough to see, are they getting the most out of them? Are they optimized? These tools that you all represent, they evolve, and you have to embrace that and you have to incorporate that into your programs. And that's the reason why you have research and development and where you're going. So it's most people, especially when they see vendors, they think the first thing is rip and replace. Oh my God, this is going to be scary. It's not always about that. Sometimes it's about just embrace what you have and get more out of it. The other thing I might mention, which I'm sure you guys will cringe a little bit when I mention this, but DDQs, right? We talked about, diligence and what the requirements are from third parties and understanding, okay, what are we getting invested in? And, I think, Chris, as you mentioned, you have sometimes rogue teams of employees that are trying to get work done and they're presenting additional risk of which you as a CISO might be responsible for, right? Or the board, if there's a fiduciary responsibility. And you have to answer these questions on a continuous basis. So you see that world evolving. So I wanted to just, stick on the subject of CISOs and Danny. We talk a lot in these summits with CISOs and CIOs about, how the current crisis represents a great opportunity actually to kind of reimagine the business and drive innovation. And it actually is it is an opportunity. It's not, it shouldn't be a threat. It should be embraced that way. And as you think about this, what are some of the opportunities that you see that you can embrace as you work with CEOs, help them reimagine the business?
I agree. I think it is a great opportunity. I mean, it's an opportunity to move away from the legacy-based network security approach and move to more of a zero trust model. You have that opportunity now with solutions like Zscaler to consolidate your outbound security stack, your egress firewalls, your threat prevention solutions, SSL decryption. We know 90% of the threats are now using or hidden in SSL streams. How can you identify and prevent that if you can't decrypt and see that traffic? So I think it is a great opportunity to reimagine your business, leverage new solutions or innovative solutions that actually help you consolidate that old security, not old, but that legacy model security stack where you have resources that are dedicated to updating it, maintaining it, making sure that you have monitoring capabilities and feeds. And there is so much work that it takes to maintain those kind of systems. Offload that work from your incident responders and your cyber professionals so they can focus on other things like investigating incidents and putting prevention capabilities in place.
Thanks, Danny. Keith, what are your thoughts on that?
I think that I think that this has really caused us to rethink how we do our jobs day in and day out. I think that this is, by design with COVID, like it's forced us to think through things like capacity planning, and that can be capacity planning around network bandwidth, but can also be, what can our infrastructure support? How many concurrent users can our network or VPN infrastructure support? So I think there's a lot of opportunity there. I think there's also probably some opportunity, depending on the business that people are in, to readjust. I mean, people have very different needs than they did 18 months ago. And depending the type of business you're in, I think that there's probably an opportunity to seize a lot of potentially new market based on what it is that people are seeking kind of in this work from home and COVID world that we're all living in.
Thanks, Keith. You talked about the future and kind of where we can go. I mean, let's say hypothetically we fast forward, 3 years from now. I mean, what do you guys think? I mean, what are we looking at from a work from home for an average size organization? Chris, I mean, what are your thoughts on what things are going to look like?
Well, I don't think we'll ever fully swing back to majority working in the office. I think we'll be in a kind of a hybrid approach. There's going to be some people that just work better being around people day in and day out, or they need to get away from certain home distractions, whether that be children, whether that be their pets. In some cases, I mean, our pets have certainly gotten used to us being around and being able to go out for potty breaks whenever they need to or want to now. So yeah, there's going to be people that just need to be in an office, and then there's going to be people who might only go in infrequently, a couple days a week, maybe once 1 week a month, to do project-driven interactions with others. And there's others that just, absolutely love the notion of never seeing another human being in person and just working from home. There's just different personalities, and I don't think we're ever going to fully swing back the other way. The question will become whether or not we learn when it comes to separation of people. The pandemic has enforced personal space in a way that we haven't done before, whereas commercial space and the pricing around renting office space has been driven about maximizing how many people you can stick in a given area. So it'll be interesting to see whether people just have a little more room within their offices when they do go in on a regular basis.
Well,
I just tack on to that. I would agree with Chris. I honestly think my dog thinks I've lost my job or something because I'm always around. I'm always home. So when we do go back, we're traveling, going back into the office. I think my dog's going to be really, really confused about what's going on. But I agree with Chris. I think, I think from an environment, we've seen that employees can be productive, and it also provides very benefits to the organization. It provides more flexibility where people can manage more of their home, work life, and I think in some cases, it's really going to help drive that recruiting and retention of employees in the workspace, because, a lot of the younger generation, they want that flexibility. So I think that's really going to help. And also, I think, today we're working at home from a pandemic. Tomorrow could be a terror attack. It could be a natural disaster, or it could be a weather event that forces us back into this environment. Because I think people have seen, I think in a lot of cases, the technology has been there for people to be able to do the remote working. But a lot of it was just that cultural, that belief that, can employees truly be productive, outside that office? And I think, people have now seen the pendulum swing the other way. Now it's people, forcing them to say, okay, it's 5 o'clock. You need to turn your computer off. You need to step away. And so, from my perspective, I think you're going to see, more technologies being invested in to support, the idea that employees and people should be able to work from anytime, anywhere. And so, looking at things like, like Danny said, zero trust access. I was also looking at the convergence of between networking and security. Things like SD-WAN to, again, ease some of that management, but also reduce, costs and gaining efficiencies, as well as knock and sock, the blending of the network and security teams.
Let's not forget SpaceX and their Starlink satellites and everything else. I mean, that's going to radically change rural broadband access. You could truly be out in the mountains and have reasonable speeds to be able to do a video conference and things of that sort. So the more of those satellites from them and other competitors go up, that's even going to further enable people to be very remote to do their work.
Absolutely.
It's very interesting if you think about, it was just years ago that we were talking about open concept, spaces for everybody, right? Nobody ever really thought about this idea, and I think to your point, like, mind shift has to change, right? And cultures have to change. And I personally came from a conservative investment banking firm that it was you were in the office 12 to 14 hours a day. And now we've actually realized people are even more productive. If anything, they are overworked being at home. One of the things I'd love to get your perspective that I am very optimistic about is the geographical opportunity to grab resources and leverage resources with cultural differences and capabilities that can bring value to your team now. In security, there's so many opportunities, right? Where just the cultural diversity in itself will bring unique value to what you're doing every day. I don't know if you guys see that the same way.
100%. Yeah, it's definitely made recruiting. I know speaking personally, it's made recruiting so much easier because you're not looking for someone just in Wisconsin or Michigan or pick up a specific territory. You basically have the world to choose from ultimately. So that the talent pool that you can recruit from is massively increased.
Yeah, no, that's a huge piece of it. I had someone that I had actually done a training session for a couple of years ago, relatively junior guy at the time, based in a second-tier city, and he couldn't stand where he was at. But as soon as he found a company that was willing to hire him in his city that he was living, which had a much lower cost, he took it in a heartbeat. And this was a couple of years ago. So now, there's a lot of people out there with the capability, whether they have the formal training or not, the raw capability is there. Now we have a chance to tap into that. And that's huge. And that's really exciting.
Yeah. And I think it gives, people more flexibility. Some people, aren't relocatable. They can't because they've got family obligations, or they have a spouse, that's tied to a geographical region because, of where they work. And so, again, I agree. I think, you're going to see, the people being able to select from various pools, developing those high-performing team. But the one thing we still do is we still need to get more people involved in those security positions, wanting them to get involved because we still have a skills shortage. We just don't have enough resources to fill all the open positions, regardless of where we're recruiting from. So I think there's also got to be some emphasis on how do we get to, the middle schoolers, the high schoolers, and start targeting them and get them interested in, cybersecurity and networking.
Thanks, Renee. I know we're coming up on time, but I can't thank each of you for participating in this panel. This has been a great discussion. I think we could keep it going forever. I'm looking forward to following up with each of you. For the audience, coming up shortly, we have our Q&A with Daryl Morey and Billy Bean, so I hope you'll join us for that. And once again, to all the panelists, thank you very much. This has been a great discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.